When finding the time, we always write it in this format. We always write the hour first, then we write 2 dots, and then we write the minutes. So let's start by finding the hour. To find the hour, we look at the hour hand, which is smaller usually and sometimes a bit thicker. You can see that it's pointing to somewhere after the 6, but not yet at the 7. So we would write that it's 6. The hour is at 6. To find the minutes, we need to follow a minute rule. So what we do, like we did with the hour hand, we find where the minute hand is pointing. The minute hand is longer usually, and we can see that it's pointing to the number 4. The minute rule that we follow is that we multiply the number that it's pointing at by 5. It's currently pointing at 4, so we're going to do 4 times 5, which is 20. So we can see that the minutes are going to be 20. So overall the time would be 6:20. When finding the minutes for the time, we usually follow the minute rule. The minute rule is when we look at the minute hand, the longer one, and we see which number it points to. This number we multiply by 5 to find the minutes normally. However, the only time we do not use this rule is when it's pointing at 12, which we're going to look at today. So as you can see on this clock, first of all we can find the hour by seeing the hour hand is pointing at 10. However, when we want to find the minutes, since it's pointing at 12, what are we going to do? We can't follow the minute rule. Well, if it points at 12, that means that there are no minutes because it's moved to a new hour. This means that we can just write 00 in the minutes. So the new hour would be 10 hours and no minutes. We normally say this to be 10 o'clock. In my earlier videos, I have taught that usually when we tell the time, we usually write it as the hours first and then the minutes. However, this is not the same when we speak about the time. You see how I've written here that the hours go first, then 2 dots, and then the minutes. However, we wouldn't say that in actual speaking. We wouldn't say that it's 5 hours and 20 minutes, but we'd say it as something else, which today this video goes over. In this video, we're going to be looking at what happens when the minute hand goes to any of these 4 points, the 12, the 3, the 6, and the 9. So, before we start telling the time aloud, we need to remember one thing, that the clocks always move clockwise. When we say clockwise, we mean that it always moves to the right first and then to the left around the clock. You can see that also counts up the clock. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. It counts forward instead of backwards. This is something that's very important and that we need to know. So, when thinking about clocks, we can imagine them to be circles. We also imagine these circles to have quarters, which is what we're going to be using when we're telling the time. So, let's see this simplified clock that I've drawn, and let's watch the minute hand as it moves around it. As we can see that the minute hand is currently at 12. We call this o'clock. Before the o'clock, we normally say what the hour is. We can see that the hour hand, the shorter one, is pointing at 5. So we would say that it is 5 o'clock. Let's see when the minute hand moves around to the 3. When the minute hand moves to the 3, we would say that this is quarter past. We say that it is quarter past because we can see that a quarter of the circle has been covered. the minute hand has moved a quarter around the circle. So it's moved a quarter past the circle. However, unlike o'clock, we say that it would be quarter past and then the hour. The hour hand is still kind of pointing at the 5, so we would say that it is quarter past 5. Let's see what happens when the minute hand moves again around the clock. We can see that it is now at the 6. When that minute hand is now at the 6, we call this to be half past. We say this is half past because now a half of the circle has been covered. See, there are 2 quarters that have been covered, and we know that 2 out of 4 pieces is equal to a half. So a half has been covered. So we would call it half past. Again, we would say the hour after the words, so we would now say that it is half past 5. Now let's see how the minute hand moves again around the clock. As we can see now, it is pointing at the 9. We would call this to be quarter to. However, let's look at the hour hand. It has slowly been moving this whole time from the 5 towards the 6. We can see that the minute hand has moved 3 quarters around the clock, so only 1 quarter is left to be moved around. Since it's been moving towards the hour 6, we would call this to be quarter to 6. We're saying that it's only a quarter of the clock left is to be covered until we reach 6 o'clock. And, before you know it, the minute hand has moved again finally around the clock one more time to 12. And we've known this before, if it's at 12, then we're back to o'clock. But since the hour hand has now been moved to 6, we would call this 6 o'clock. So let's look back at everything we've learnt. When it's at 12, we would call it o'clock. When it's at 3, we would call it quarter past. When it's at 6, we would call it half past. And when it's at 9, we would call it quarter to. These are the 4 main points that we are meant to know. However, if we want to know the points in between them, then you'll have to check the next video. In this video, we're going to be expanding more on how to tell the time when we're speaking. In the last video, we looked at the 4 main points on a clock, the 12, the 3, the 6 and the 9. And we learnt that they have different words that come with them. For example, with 12 we have o'clock, with 3 we have quarter past, with 6 we have half past, and 9 we have quarter to. We're going to be looking more in this video at how we tell the time when speaking if the minute hand is not on one of these main points. As you can see, anywhere in these blue areas. The first fact that we need to know before we start is that there are 60 minutes in an hour. We know this because we follow the minute rule, which is we multiply whatever number the minute hand is on by 5. We can see that the biggest number that is on the clock is 12. And if we do 12 multiplied by 5, we get 60. So we know that there are 60 minutes in an hour. Now let's begin. In the last video, we looked at how the clocks have 4 quarters each with them, and we looked at these each 4 quarters. However, in this video, we're going to be looking at the clock's halves and how they interact with each other. So, let's start with our first half. Let's look at the 2 main points on this half that we want to look at today. We can see that they have quarter past and half past. Both of these phrases have the word past in their name. This is because this half of the clock describes by how much we have passed on the clock in minutes. So, when talking about other numbers on the clock in this half, we will also use past in the phrase when speaking. For this half, we're going to say the minute, then the word past, and then we're going to say the hour. So, let's find the minute first. We always follow the minute rule when finding the minute, which is we multiply the number on the minute hand by 5. As we can see, the minute hand, which is the longer red one here, is pointing at 2. So we do 2 multiplied by 5, which equals to 10. We know that, and we can see that the hour is pointing at 5. So overall, we would say that it is 10 past 5. Let's try it again with a different time. This time the minute hand is pointing at 4. We could say what the time is by using the minute rule again, which is 4 multiplied by 5, which is 20. The hour hand has not changed, it is still pointing at 5, so we would say it is 20 past 5. Now we've looked at that half, let's look at the other half. On this other half, we have one main point that we want to look at today, and that is 1/4 to. In this half, we are describing by how much we have left on the clock until the next hour. So we're going to see how many minutes we need to pass until the next hour will begin. So we will also use the word to in our phrases when speaking. So instead of saying minute past hour, we're going to say minute to hour. With this half of the clock, we're going to be following the minute rule a bit differently. Normally, the minute rule is that we number the number on the minute hand, we always multiply by 5. But since on this half of the clock, we want to find how many minutes are left until the next hour, so we want to find how many minutes to the next hour, we want to do 60 minutes take away the current minute, which the minute hand sits on. We do this because we know that 60 minutes equals an hour, and we want to find how many minutes are left until the next hour will begin. We know that the minute hand points at the current minute, so if we do 60 minutes take away the current minute, we will find how many minutes are left until the next hour will begin. So let's work this out. We can see that the current minute is shown by where the minute hand is pointing, which is 10. 10 times 5 equals 50, following the minute rule. So we would do 60 minutes take away 50 minutes, which equals the number of minutes we have left. 60 take away 50 is equal to 10. So we know that there are 10 minutes left until the next hour begins. So we would say 10 and then 2, 7. We say 7 because the hour hand points at 7. Let's try it again with a different time. This time our hands are changed. Remember, we always do 60 minutes, take away the current minute to find how many minutes are left until the next hour begins. We can see that the current minute hand is pointing at 8. If we follow the minute rule and we do 8 multiplied by 5, we find 40. So let's do 60 minutes, take away 40 minutes, which is equal to 20 minutes. So now we know that there are 20 minutes left until the next hour begins. So now we can say that it is 20 to 11. We say 11 because the hour hand is pointing at the number 11. That was a lot that we just went through. It could be confusing to some people, so if it was, you can skip back and you can re-watch it until you understand again. There is one more point that I want to go over in this video, and that is when we want to see what time it is when the minute hand is not pointing at a number. So far we've looked at what it is when the minute hand points at a number, so such as 12 or 2 or 7. But what if the minute hand is not pointing anywhere between them? It's pointing halfway or somewhere like that. Well, to find that out, we need to zoom in on the clock. We can see that on the clocks, they have their each little lines. Each of these little lines represent 1 minute. So we can see that the minute hand is in the past half, which we were talking about. So we're going to see how many minutes there are past the first hour. We can see that it's pointing at this little line. So we're going to count how many minutes it is until that line is reached, which is 8. So there are 8 minutes past the hour. The hour there was 5, so it is 8 past 5. Thank you very much for watching. In the last video, we looked at 12-hour clocks. 12-hour clocks are basically big circles with the numbers 1 to 12 arranged all around them, with a minute hand and an hour hand. These 12-hour clocks are called analog clocks. However, today we're going to be looking at the other type of clocks, which are called digital clocks. So let's have a look about how we write them. We write digital clocks in this way. We write the hour first, then 2 dots, then the minutes. We've seen this format before in our first few videos, so it shouldn't be too hard to write it in this way. However, when we're writing in digital clocks, there's one change that we normally use, and that is we use the hours from numbers 1 to 24 instead of 1 to 12 like we did with analog clocks. Let me show you why. There are 24 hours in one day and one night. So by using the 24-hour clock, we can tell whether the time is at day or at night. Let me show you what I mean. Look at the clock here. The clock here shows 20 to 12. Or we can say that it's 1:40. But we don't know if it's 1:40 at night or 1:40 in the day. However, with the 24-hour clock, we know if it's at night or at day. So let's see how the 24-hour clock works. We have a long timeline here, from night to day and then back to night. We have the first 12 hours here and the last 12 hours here, since we know that 12 at 12 is 24, which is how many hours is in a day and a night. Let's look at this time here, 16 hours. This is written in the 24-hour clock format. Let's see where it is on the number line. We can see that 16 is right here, and if we look up, we can see that it's still in the daytime, maybe in the afternoon. So this is one way to tell if it's day or night using the digital time. However, there is also another way we can tell whether it's day or night using the digital time. This is by using the 12-hour clock, but with different endings called AM or PM. The ending AM refers to the first 12 hours of the day, and the ending PM refers to the last 12 hours of the day. Let's see what I mean by this. Let's go back to this timeline. We can see that the first 12 hours represent AM and the last 12 hours represent PM. But let's see how this works, because I said that it's a 12-hour clock. However, here we can clearly see that there's 24 hours. Well, with the PM half, it's a bit more tricky. What we do is that we can talk about the last 12 hours if we reuse the first 12 hours and the ending PM. So we can move the first 12 hours along to where the last 12 hours is, and we can basically make a connection with each of the two numbers. So we can see that 13 hours is equal to 1 p.m. We can see that 14 hours is equal to 2 p.m. and so on. So let's have a go telling the time using this. If we see we have 8 a.m., let's see where it is on the timeline. Well, we can see that it has the ending am. We know that am refers to the first 12 hours of the day. So let's find the number 8 there. And we can see that it's in the early morning. But what about 8 p.m.? Well, we can see that p.m. refers to the last 12 hours of the day. So we can find the number 8 here. We can see that the number 8 has a connection with the number 20. So it would be at 20 hours, shown here. And this is about where it turns nighttime. So let's have a go at using this way. Let's say we have a digital clock and it says 5:45 a.m. What can we get from looking at this clock? Well, we can see that it has the ending am. We know that this refers to the first 12 hours of the day. Let's go back to our timeline. Let's look at where it says am. We remember that it was 5:45. We can see that 5:45 is somewhere around about in between the 5 and the 6. And if we draw an arrow, we can see that that's nearly at the night time, but almost turning daytime. Let's have a look at a similar clock, except we can see that the ending says PM instead of AM. We know that this ending means that we are talking about the last 12 hours of the day. So if we go back to our timeline, we can see that we're talking about the numbers here. We remember that we were talking about 5:45, so somewhere in between the 5 and the 6. We can draw an arrow going up, and we can see that 5:45 is equal to a 17:45, which is about where it starts to turn nighttime. So 5:45 p.m. is equal to 17 hours and 45 minutes. So let's see how we can convert from the 12-hour clock to the 24-hour clock. The word convert means that we are changing the way we are writing something into a different way, but that it still means the same thing. So we are just rewriting it in a sense. So let's see how we can do this with these two examples. First of all, we have 5:45 a.m. You can see that says AM, so referring to the first 12 hours of the day. Since 5:45 is within the first 12 hours, 1 to 12, we actually don't need to convert for this. So 5:45 AM will just equal 5:45. We normally write a 0 before the 5, just because there's always 2 digits at the start and 2 digits at the end. Now let's look at the other clock. We can see that the other clock has the ending of PM. We know that the ending PM means that we are talking about the last 12 hours of the day. Now, since 5:45 is in the last 12 hours of the day, we will have to add 12 hours onto it as it is PM. When we say PM, we need to add 12 hours. For the one above, 5:45 was in the first 12 hours of the day, but since it was 1 to 12, we didn't need to add anything onto it. But since we're talking about the last 12 hours of the day, we're actually referring to the hours 13 to 24, which 5:45 is not in, so we will have to add 12 hours onto. If we add 12 hours onto 5:45 p.m, it becomes 17:45. So how about we try the other way now? How can we convert from the 24-hour clock back to the 12-hour clock? Well, remember, convert, we are changing the way we are writing something into a different way, but that still means the same thing. This one's more easier. Let's look at the time we have here, 17:45. Notice how we don't have any ending here since it's not needed. we can see that the hour is 17. We can see that 17 is in the last 12 hours of the day. Since the first 12 hours of the day is between the numbers 1 to 12, the last 12 hours of the day are in between the numbers 13 to 24. Since 17 is in between 13 to 24, we need to take away 12 hours, which is the reverse of what we just did, so that it would be in between 1 to 12. 17:45 take away 12 hours is 5:45 p.m. Since it was in the last 12 hours, we just need to add a p.m. onto the end of 5:45. So that's why we add a p.m. So before we end, let's just see how this clock works. Before we end the video, I would like to show you how this works with an actual clock in front of us, so we can see in real time how it works. Right now, we have the 12-hour mode on. Let's click it on actually. We can see that it says currently 3 a.m. The a.m. means that we're in the first 12 hours of the day. So we know that 3 a.m. means about in the middle of the night. You can see that the minute hand moves and the minutes go up with it. It goes to 4, 5, 6, and the hour slowly starts to go up. Let's see what happens when we hit 12 in the AM sector. See, when we hit 12, we have started the PM ending. This is because all of the minutes after are now in the last 12 hours of the day, so we need a PM ending. And we can keep on going around and around until we get to 11:59 PM, and when we hit 12, it goes back to AM, since we're starting the first 12 hours of the new day. This is how the 12-hour clock works. Let's see how the 24-hour clock works. When I click it, you can see that the endings disappear and a little zero happens in front of the hour. This is just so we keep the format of 2 digits, 2 dots, and then 2 digits. These 2 zeros we don't really need to worry about. So let's see as it goes up, and right now it goes up pretty normally. Let's see what happens when we try to hit after 12. When we go to 12:59, it goes to 13 hours, which is what we were talking about before. We have started the last 12 hours of the day, but we don't have any ending to talk about it, since we can just see that these numbers are all above 12. Let's see what happens when we hit the 24th hour. We go to 59 and the zeros across the board. These zeros represent that a new day has just started. So we don't have any hours yet. So this is the first minute of the day, second minute, and so on. And yeah, that's how clocks work. Thank you very much.